As you mentioned, despite a federal judge temporarily blocking President Trump's deployment of the National Guard to Portland, troops are in other major cities protecting Americans from crime and from illegal aliens. DHS says over 1,000 dangerous illegals have been arrested in Chicago. Joey Jones is at the touchscreen to break down the federal fight against criminal illegal aliens. Take it away, Joey.
Yeah, guys, so a lot of what's happening right now is somebody saying, hey, why can't Trump just send the National Guard into Portland to protect our federal agents that are there? I want to explain a little bit that to you, and you can go do your own research because I'm not a lawyer, but some of my friends are, and I did stay at a Holiday Inn last night. So the chain of command is where we start here, right? And what you see is you see President Donald Trump, and you also see governors of the states, and they both start at the top, and they work their way down to the National Guard elements. President Trump operates off what's called Title 10, and a governor would operate off what's called Title 32. And so I'm going to explain a little bit of what that means. I'm going to go back a slide here. What's happening right now is we're discussing President Trump being able to send National Guard troops to places that are Democrat-held, where the governor and mayor won't work with the president to bring in the National Guard. In that case, he's got to use Title 10. One of several provisions in Title 10 is the United States or any of the Commonwealths or possessions is invaded or is in danger of invasion by foreign nations. So in an earlier segment, if you were tuned in at the beginning of the show, I said this whole idea of going to war against drug cartels is to build this case for attacking the ones that make it here in our country. And that's what that means. If you position this argument that we're being invaded by an organized crime ring or cartels or even other countries, now you've got Title 10 authority. Right now what's happening is, like in the case in Portland, judges are ruling against the current administration's argument for that. So if we move on and show you, that's where we don't have National Guard troops yet because of that. I'm going to show you right here. This is the amount of illegals in the country in these areas, but I'm going to circle a couple of places for you. I'm going to circle D.C. and Tennessee. So those are the two places that the National Guard is either already mobilized or about to be. In D.C., it's easy because D.C. doesn't have a governor. It's a federal district. The president has that authority under Title 32. Title 32 says a governor can enact the National Guard. And so in Tennessee, what's happening is the Governor Lee there, along with his attorney general, is crafting an argument or has crafted an argument saying we are going to mobilize the National Guard to support law enforcement. Now, the reason why this matters is there are several pieces of legislation, but two that are most important: the Insurrection Act and the Posse Comitatus Act. Those two regulate how even a governor or a president can use the National Guard, any military here at home, for law enforcement purposes. It all goes back to the 10th Amendment that talks about, hey, if we don't give the federal government permission, it defaults to the states. And so what's happening in these two places is President Trump can more easily mobilize the National Guard simply because the governor in Tennessee is a Republican and is on board, so he's using his Title 32, and the president has Title 32 of his own in D.C. And so the reason why that matters is we're fighting over the litigious nature of using the National Guard here at home. And in the meantime, these cities, we see ICE agents under attack. We see, bad actors that are illegal immigrants here doing bad things. President Trump is just trying to use the tools he has to protect Americans. And we want to talk about why that's important. Here's some examples of who he's trying to protect Americans from. In Operation Midway Blitz, which is what's going on in Chicago, this is without the National Guard yet. You see some of the worst here, convicted of rape, statutory rape, charged with murder, rape, or sexual abuse. And we go on down the line here. These are the kind of people that DHS and President Trump says they need to get in there and get off the street. We keep moving forward here. We've got anti-ICE rioters facing federal charges in Chicago. So these are people that have attacked ICE. They're facing charges for physically attacking ICE. We move on from there and we talk about what's going on in Portland, where a judge has blocked the National Guard from coming in there. I think it was the mayor or the governor there saying, oh, there's nothing happening here. If you come here, you're just going to see peaceful people. There's no crime here. There's no violence. Here are three great examples caught on camera of people doing that. Federal charges for rioting against ICE, not protesting. And then I think that might be, we're back to square one. So the argument here is, yes, you do have to present legally how the President of the United States is going to use military troops here at home. He's got Title 10 at his disposal. When he has a governor that's willing to work with him, he's got Title 32. But there are challenges because we've passed laws in the creation of this country and even in our Constitution that say, hey, you can't just bring in troops against the United States people. What President Trump would say is it's not against the United States. It's not against citizens. It's against non-citizens who have invaded our country. There's where the legality is. But we just showed you it's a real problem, and it's going to claim lives.
Thanks so much, Joey. And I wanted to ask you, too, going off that point, I think you're the best possible person for us to ask, is we've got Democrats and these leaders of these blue cities and these blue states saying, well, President Trump is militarizing the troops against our own citizens. And that's the picture that they are attempting to paint. And so, Joey, as you get back from the touchscreen here, I guess you're the one with the best perspective on this. When you see the president using his power to protect federal agents and federal facilities, is that militarizing the troops against the American people? And would that qualify, in your mind, as someone who has fought wars on behalf of the American people?
It's easy to say things like that when you're uneducated and you don't take the time to learn how these troops are regulated, even when they're brought in. This very, very small scope of what they can do, even when they get there. The number one thing they've done in D.C. is show of force, basically intimidating criminals. Because I was just there last week. You turn the corner and there's 4 or 5 National Guard troops there in battle rattle. I'm probably not going to steal a car. I'm just probably not going to do it. Even if they can't do much to me, I'm not going to do it in front of them. That's the best purpose they can provide. Secondly, they may have to have an active role in securing some of these places as protesters become rioters. If you are rioting and attacking a public building, you're an American citizen attacking American citizens. We want all the help we can get to keep us safe.
You'd think. Alicia, I want to ask you about that as well, kind of to Joey's point there. Just as an everyday American, when if I saw a National Guardsman, if I see a police officer, if I see a federal agent, I automatically feel safer. I feel better. I feel like, hey, someone's going to have my back should I need them. Should I find myself in the midst of chaos? Should I find myself in the midst of one of these anarchy-filled riots? And as a fellow woman on the panel here, I just have to ask you, because Democrats are trying to convince us that we should feel less safe.
No, I get exactly where you're coming from. And this morning I went for a walk, and there was a parade that they were preparing for on Fifth Avenue. So there were NYPD everywhere preparing for today. And it made me smile over and over again because, I was really enjoying the walk in a totally different way. I want to add one thing, though. The National Guard that has been held up from Oregon being activated because of this federal court order. Governor Gavin Newsom said the president is now sending 300 California National Guard to Portland, and he's calling it public. He says this isn't about public safety, it's about power. Governor Gavin Newsom.
Wow. Well, I wouldn't expect anything else from Governor Gavin Newsom.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.